My partner and I agree with the resolution that the benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. But before we go into our three contentions, we would like to define the phrase offensive cyber operations. The United States military defines offensive cyber operations as operations intended to project power by the application of force in or through cyberspace. Cyberspace is defined as the online world of computer networks and especially the internet. Our three contentions include offensive cyber operations to protect the United States. It would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations. And finally, offensive cyber operations provide additional options short of conventional military operations that would have been previously employed. Less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. Contention 1. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States. At a recent cybersecurity event at Georgetown Law School, Richard Leggett, former deputy director of the National Security Agency, cited well over 100 countries around the world are now capable of launching cyber attacks. The United States is already a part of an ongoing cyber battle with the countries such as China, Russia, and North Korea, and others. According to the Department of Defense's Cyber Strategy Summary in 2018, malicious cyber activities to harm United States citizens and threaten U.S. interests are on the rise globally. This summary goes on to report the Department of Defense will defend its network system information from malicious cyber activity. We will halt or defend forward cyber operations targeting the department. Contention 2. Defensive cyber operations are not as effective as offensive cyber operations. According to James Andrew Luce, Senior Director of the Technology Policy Program, a purely defensive approach cedes the initiative to the opponent and leaves the defender in a reactive posture. No military would choose that. The U.S. Department of Defense seeks to preempt harmful cyber activity targeting U.S. crucial infrastructure in order to defend the U.S. homeland and stop threats before they reach their targets. The difference between offensive cyber operations and defensive cyber operations is proactive versus reactive. Cyber attackers average more than 5 breaches each day as of 2016, according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. As of 2018, the Department of Defense's summary repeats that the United States government has trended towards more offensive cyber operations as compared to defensive. Unless the United States continues to use offensive cyber operations on the United States would be subject to continuous and persistent attacks on their networks, states in active cyber defense certainty. Contention 3. Less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations. Evidence from the Center for Strategic and International Studies article, The Rationale for Offensive Cyber Capabilities, reports that we need not moan the horrors of cyber war. People have let their imaginations run away with the consequences of cyber attack. It's not a weapon of mass destruction. Unlike nuclear weapons, cyber attacks can have a strategic effect without mass consequences. An example of successful offensive cyber attack the United States launched was on Iran in June 2019. It was reported to be successful and provides response options short of armed conflict. Brandon Valiano, a researcher on cybersecurity and international relations, support this statement by reporting that these cyber operations, which happen to be offensive, can help de-escalate militarized disputes. My partner and I strongly affirm the resolution. The benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms, and for these reasons, we strongly urge a no ballot.
The 10th International Conference on Cyber Conflict came together in October of 2018. The goal was to determine a consensus on what offensive cyber capabilities did for the U.S. in the past 2 years. Their consensus was this: there is a growing interest in the use of offensive cyber capabilities among states. Despite the growing interest in these capabilities, little is still known about the nature of these offensive cyber conflicts as a tool for the state. The partner and I strongly negate the resolution for the following reasons. Offensive cyber operations are vulnerable to malicious hacks. They create tension among affected countries, and the U.S. is not prepared for a counteroffensive operation due to its lackluster defensive operations. A few definitions. According to the 10th International Conference on Cyber Conflict, Cyber operations are defined as conducting offensive and defensive cyber operations in support of the full range of military options. Workers with cyber operations utilize devices, computers, programs, and techniques designed to create effect across cyberspace. Offensive operations include applying force, targeted enemy, and hostile adversary activities and capabilities. Cyber offensives increase tensions. According to the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center, faith in offensive dominance is understandable. Breaches of information systems are common, ranging from everyday identity theft to well-publicized hacks. On government policy issues, a focus on defense, however, increases international tensions and states' readiness to launch a counter-offensive after a cyber attack, and it often heightens cyber vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, belief in cyber offensive dominance is not based on a clear conception or empirical measurement of the offense/defense balance. The U.S. is not prepared for counter-strike, as most of the efforts in cyber wars have been offensive, instead of focusing on defensive precautions. In the article from the Hill researcher editorial out of Seattle, Wisconsin, attacks against companies or individuals often target sensitive data for monetary gain, but offensive cyber measures by nation-states are designed for disruption, damage, and sometimes destruction. Retaliation could target civilian systems, sending a strong message from the significant impact and putting the attacked nation at risk of facing penalties for their actions based on a new agreement. This is from the article, and this next is from the article on the nationalinterest.org. In the cyber world, defensive success does not discourage attackers. Advantage comes from the use of capabilities, not their possession. Thus, in a domain where cyber capabilities are likely to be used as a first strike weapon, surprising your adversary is much more important. Further decreasing the likelihood that signaling will take place. Further insecurities created during rapidly regeneration capability in cyberspace, causing any relative superiority gained by the United States to be inherently fleeting and thus deterring an adversary from responding to traditional deterrent strategies. In other words, even if the United States were to gain superiority in the cyber field, it would not last long, as would likely encourage other factors to attack the United States using newly developed cyber technologies. My partner and I strongly negate the resolution due to the evidence that shows these harms of offensive cyber operations truly outweighs their benefits. From their vulnerability to malicious acts to their increase of tension and unpreparedness of counterattacks, we strongly encourage a conflict.
Could we use scrub time?
Yep. Alright, I'm sorry now.
So, I think this is your first one about vulnerability. Do you know how often these attacks take place?
I do not have any sources on that, but I know that they're pretty frequent. You say offensive is better than just defense, right? Than defensive.
Yeah.
But
Well, what we're saying is that offensive cyber operations are more effective than defensive.
our source says that offensive only promotes vulnerability. So it would
saying is if we were to solely just rely on defensive or just like focus more on our defensive operations, then it would be helping protect us, but we also wouldn't be as prepared for it if it comes where we actually have to attack someone else. Okay, and you're talking about creating tensions. Do you have any examples of any specific tensions that have been created due to cyber offenses?
Any specific intentions?
Yeah, so like any examples of any tensions that have been created due to cyber offenses?
No, I do not. So, you would agree that defensive cyber operations would you say that they help? Like, would you say that they're valuable to the US?
Well, yes, defenses are just as needed as offensive operations, but we still need, I think what we're saying is offensive operations are still more important as they help us in cases where we need to attack someone or if we are currently in civil war or we need to start.
That's all I have.
I have one more question. So can you further like explain your point on like how we're not prepared for cyber strikes?
For counter strikes?
Yeah.
So in my 2 articles that I sourced, I said that, or they said that
Time.
Lawrence, ready? Partner ready? Judge ready? Alright, I'd like to take this time to strengthen our own points and address some claims made by opponent if time's permit. Once again, our 3 contentions include offensive cyber operations, protect the United States. They would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations, and finally, offensive cyber operations would mean less harm is done by cyber operations. I'd like to restate the claim. The Department of Defense's Cyber Strategy Summary in 2018 reports that malicious cyber activities are on the rise globally that are intended to harm the United States citizens and threaten U.S. interests. Unless the United States continues to use offensive cyber operations, the United States will become subject to continuous and persistent attacks on their network. So, I believe that the United States should use proactive thinking instead of defensive. Proactive meaning acting in anticipation of future problems, needs, or changes according to the Webster Dictionary. I believe that it would be beneficial to the United States using offensive cyber attacks instead of defensive. Senator Mike Rounds, who chairs the Senate and Armed Services Cybersecurity Subcommittee, describes our goal is to get ahead of the problems before they occur. Our vision is about how do you tie the power of intelligence and the insights that generates with the operational capability. I believe that's important because Senator works for the government, states that we should use proactive instead of reactive events. Another statistic I'd like to bring up is the by 2013, U.S. networks were already under constant attack from sophisticated nation-state actors. Hackers stole millions of sensitive records from office and personnel management and gained access to the White House networks and destroyed dozens of computers that Sony Pictures thousands of miles away. The United States has since shifted their attentions towards offensive cyber operations while maintaining strong defensive cyber operations. While doing this, I don't believe the United States would be ignorant enough to leave themselves completely and totally defenseless while attacking a foreign nation. Let's see.
our opponents failed to mention how often hacks take place during when the United States is conducting offensive cyber operations. And there doesn't seem to be enough information on the harms of cyber operations that have actually happened. Again, my partner questioned our opponents asking when have cyber operations led to raised tensions between countries, and he did not have an example for that. But we do have the pro side has an example of a time where offensive cyber operations helped a situation when Iran was attacked on June 2019 by us. It was reported to be successful and provides response options short of conflict. And Brandon Valerio agrees with that statement and adds it can help de-escalate deadly militarized disputes. This is why we urge a pro ballot.
Ready? Judge ready? Partner ready? During this portion of the debate, I'd like to first strengthen my own points, as well as touch on the points that my opponents made and show how they're wrong. First of all, I'd like to point out that this debate is not about which is better, offensive or defensive cyber operations. This debate is about the benefits or the harms, which one outweighs the other. And throughout our case, we have shown how the offensive cyber operations, their harms, have outweighed the benefits of them. Our opponents, however, have taken the side that offensive is better than defensive, which this debate is not about. Our opponents say that we would have a strong defense in place if we were to continue attacking, because that's just where we are. That's about what they said. However, I would like to take the time now to strengthen our point about how cyber offensive leads to vulnerabilities to malicious attacks from foreign countries, otherwise known as hacks. This is from the Federation from American Scientists in an article posted in 2018. It states that meanwhile there are persistent vulnerabilities inherent in the Department of Defense information systems, said members of the Department of Defense. I will use the acronym DoD to signify the Department of Defense from now. Many critical U.S. legacy systems are not easily modified or patched. As a result, many of the risks incurred across the DoD are introduced via unpatched and effectively unpatchable systems in the DoD-IN, or the Department of Defense Information Networks. These risks are increased because DoD classified and unclassified networks are targeted by myriad actions from foreign nations to malicious insiders. What this is saying in common terms is when we launch an offensive cyber operation, we're spending solely our time focusing on that offense, meaning we're not setting up for a defensive counterstrike. While yes, if we attack one country, they might be shut down, but other countries may see that we're vulnerable now and may attack us, meaning we don't have a good enough defenses system to come and prepare for that. Our opponents also stated that we didn't have a source for an actual time that this has harmed us. However, we just ran out of time, and we would like to state it now. We have a source from the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center. It stated that faith in offensive dominance is understandable. Breaches in information systems are common. In the U.S., two main ones include everyday identity theft, which is a prevalent issue that many court cases have been about, including Facebook, Twitter, as well as many other private companies, as well as a 2016 act on the Democratic National Committee, or the whole thing that's worth the whole Russia conversation between Donald Trump, Russia, and his connection. So these are just a few examples of the many that have shown how these cyber offenses that we have launched have left us vulnerable, and others have come and attacked us, showing that these are very harmful for us. With that, I'd like to touch on my opponent's point. It protects the United States. They said that, they also said in their sources that there are 100 countries ready to be able to throw out a cyber attack. The US cannot physically attack 99 other countries at the same time, expecting them to all be shut down and never attack us. If we attack one, they might see that as an attack with other allied nations and come at us from a different angle. This is why we encourage a calm vote on this resolution.
Everyone ready?
I actually didn't have a prior question. I would like to go first.
Oh, okay, that's fine. You said the United States is not prepared for cyber strikes. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, so, like my source says with the American Federation of American Scientists, when we launch an offensive cyber attack, it leaves us vulnerable. With the defense networks are unpatched, and this might be I don't know if you know what unpatched means, but when we send out an unpatched packet to someone, it means that we are still able to change it in case they get into it, meaning we can shut it down and make sure it doesn't come right back at us. We have to do this just in case other countries were to get into it. If we send out patched packets and it got lost somewhere, we can't ever get into it. We never know where it might go. So with that, it also leads to vulnerability of uncertainties. We don't know where these attacks might go because cyberspace is a generally new topic. According to the 10th International Conference on Cyber Conflict, they did state that little is still known about the nature of offensive cyber capabilities as a tool of the state.
Once again, do you have a statistic or source of when or how many times a country took advantage of another country while cyber operations was in place?
We do not have a specific source, but as we mentioned in my rebuttal speech, with the attack that was done on the Democratic National Conference, it's a major, huge thing that has sparked conflict from then on in 2016. It's still a prevalent issue today. So with that, as well as other minor identity thefts, it is a very prevalent issue that has occurred.
If we would have stopped that problem from even existing in the first place, would that have been better rather than taking a defensive or reactive approach?
Do you have a statistic that says that we knew it was coming at us?
I don't think there is a statistic for that even being possible.
Okay.
Available to the public.
So with that, I'd like to point out the fact that cyberspace is a very unpredictable thing. We don't know when an attack is coming. We can't really track it. Whereas a U.S. military attack, we can see, government from this, like satellites. We can see where people are. Cyberspace, we have no clue. We don't know when an attack is coming. Therefore, if we launch offensive, we don't know if someone's already got a plan to attack us right away.
Well, like you just said, there's no way to know that the attack is coming, so how could they counterattack us?
Huh?
You said that you don't know when a cyber attack is coming, correct?
Yes.
Then how do you know? Then how would the other nation that we're attacking know that we were attacking them, and how could they come back so quickly?
With the prevalence, with the relevancy of the internet today, we are out of time.
To summarize this debate, my party and I affirm a resolution that the benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms. My opponent's contentions are our offenses are vulnerable. It creates more tension between nations, and we are unprepared for cyber attacks. However, since cyber offensives haven't been around that long, there has been very little proof that some of the things they're claiming to be true actually haven't happened, or that there's very little proof that this is true for every single nation. They have mentioned the word may several times, meaning that these things could possibly happen, not that they have actually happened. My partner and I have provided several reasons on why things are true that have actually happened. In our first contention, offensive cyber operations protect our country. We said that 100 countries have developed cyber operations. We never said that we would attack them or that we are going to in the future. This is just stating that the fact that these countries and nations have the ability to produce attacks or defend their own countries from attacks. My partner and I strongly affirm the resolution. The benefits of the United States federal government's use of offensive cyber operations outweigh the harms for the following reasons. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States. It would be more effective than using only defensive cyber operations. And finally, less harm is done by the United States by using offensive cyber operations.
Sorry.
Everyone's ready? So, I'm going to start my story by stating that, again, little is still known about the nature of little is still known about the nature of these offensive cyber operations, and so we never know what could happen. This could lead to all-out global cyber wars and other things like that. Also, it increases international tensions and states' readiness to launch a counteroffensive after a cyber attack. So if we attacked another state, the other state's readiness and they will have tension and their readiness for a counterattack, and they will be ready to counterattack. Also, I'm going to again state that these offensive cyber capabilities, the government has lost $1.3 billion according to the ASPI Institute because of these operations not working well, or other examples like that. So we've lost $1.3 billion from these cyber attacks. This is why we urge you a combat.
Guys ready? Okay.
why assume the worst about cyber operations since you stated not much is known? We are looking to see if the benefits are bad of it. So why do you assume the worst?
Why do we assume the worst? Because we have already stated how things we do know in our side, we have proven how the harms have outweighed the benefits so far, meaning in the future, it would just be continue the same because of what we have now.
To clarify, these are potential harms?
These are potential harms, as well as the harms that have already happened to the Democratic National Conference, as well as all the numerous amount of identity thefts that have happened.
So if little, like, you guys can bring up, if little is unknown about these, how can we be sure that some of your claims are actually true? Like, I think one of them you have failed to provide an example for, I think it was when you were either your first or third.
Would you like us to repeat our contentions?
Well, I'm just not exactly sure which one was mentioned, but I know that you failed to provide an example for one of those three. You failed to provide an example of, like, an example of harm.
I believe with our rebuttal speech, I did clarify on two topics that my partner was unable to provide a source for. So we do feel that we have given significant evidence about that. The question I have for you is, you said how these cyber attacks had not been around for long. I believe that's what you said. Yep, that's right. So how do you know that new technology will come up that we're not prepared for? And if we continue sending out cyber attacks, we aren't preparing for any new things that are coming.
Well, we aren't able to tell that, but just because we do have strong cyber defenses doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be using it right away to attack people. Just because we're making our offenses stronger doesn't mean we're necessarily using it to attack people. Or just something that's just because we want to be prepared for it.
Okay, so you're saying if we have, we're using our offensive cyber operations towards preparedness, and then once it does happen, we can send out ours,
Not
right?
necessarily, because I'm pretty sure, I don't know if I have it right here, but I know some of the stuff due to China and Russia and North Korea, like we mentioned, has caused us to increase our cyber offenses, and most of those we have used right away, but not all.
I have a question. You gave an example of the government spending lots on these offensive cyber operations. What is an example of a cyber operation conducted by the United States not working?
I said example.
Yes.
I do not have an example, but it's
Time.
When it's ready? Partner ready? Yeah. Bench ready? What this debate has really boiled down to is the potential risks of cyber operations. Potential harms in which our opponents have no evidence of even happening, except for one example of a democratic issue with the government. While my partner and I have continuously mentioned an example of when benefits of cyber operations have worked, they've also brought up that cyber operations cost money, but isn't that cost worth it if we protect our nation and act in a proactive way instead of reactive and prevent these harms from even coming towards us? To review, our three contentions, once again, are defensive cyber operations are not as effective as offensive cyber operations. Offensive cyber operations protect the United States, and less harm is done by the United States using cyber operations, and we strongly urge the judge to cast a pro ballot.
Opponent ready? Judge ready? Partner ready? To begin, I'd like to clarify a very important piece of evidence that we have already brought up with the concern of how much it has cost. It's not how much it has cost us to produce cyber attacks, that's how much money we have lost because of cyber attacks. That this is because we were vulnerable. We were not prepared. We sent out offensive, we weren't prepared for it, and we've already lost 1.3 million. Our opponents have stated how this has only been for a short amount of time. So how do we know that that number couldn't triple? It could go up by 10 times in the next 5 years. We don't know. This is a huge potential harm. And this is why the benefits of the United States federal use of offensive cyber operations do not outweigh the harms. As the 10th International Conference for Cyber Conflict states, little is still known. The uncertainty of this shows exactly why these harms outweigh the benefits. We encourage you to comment.